Today on Riffs, Beards, and Gear, we plan a pedal board using bias effects from Positive Grid. So the song you just heard was a truncated version of a song that is on my band Rest Repose's new EP, the Sleep City EP, and it's lovingly called Vader because that's basically the amp that I used to demo it when I originally wrote the song, and it just kind of stuck. But in the process of tracking DIs when we were in pre-production for the EP, I kind of used bias effects to kind of plan my pedal board on how I was going to play these songs live. Now you'll notice, for example, that I have a phaser on the main pedal board on the dirty tone, and I don't have one on my board because I did, and I thought I needed it, but I never used it. So why keep it on the board? And my options are pretty limited on my board because I didn't want a huge board, and I have a programmable looper that I use to switch the channel on my dual rectifier, and I only have 4 different switching options that I can use. So I really got to make it count. And that's why I put a reverb instead of the phase pedal. And that really kind of helped me, bias effects really kind of helped me hash that out. So for today's video, we're going to go through the song that you just heard, and I'm going to show you the different configurations of the board that I'm using for tones in this scenario. Now first is the Ebo Tone, and it sounds like this. Now the intro is an Ebo on a dirty channel, and that's how I play it live. And it starts off with the dirty guitar, so my board, there's 2 tracks, they're both identical. And the board is basically, I have the delay going right into the front, not the effects loop, because I liked the distorted delay of the analog delay. Now in real life, I have an MXR carbon copy. And the analog delay that's modeled after the Boss analog delay is also a wonderful delay, so I just use that straight into the rectifier model, and it sounds like this. Now I wanted it to kind of sound like a violin, so it made sense to me to buy an Ebo just to try it out, because I never actually used an Ebo before I wrote this song. So it worked out really, really well because I was only familiar with the Sustainiac pickup before. So that's the intro. Now the main dirty tone, I used 2 different variations. So on the left-hand side, I used a modern 3-channel triple rectifier, and on the right-hand side, I used a 2-channel dual rectifier. And I use that for just flavor within the mix. Now, normally, obviously, live, I use 1 amp, but it's important to note that with the band, when we're playing out live, I use a 90s 2-channel dual rectifier, and our other guitarist, Tony, uses a 3-channel dual rectifier. So it really made sense to kind of model that in the DAW and in the project. Now, I was able to do that pretty easily with bias effects. So the main rhythms sound like this. Now I wanted to go from a huge, big, distorted guitar tone to a nice, pretty clean, major key for the verse. And I did that with the secondary board. And it's just 2 tracks. It's the same board. This is where I was talking about the amps. Obviously, the dual rectifier, you can't switch within the bias effects, but there are plenty of amps to choose from. So I just picked one that's kind of based, I think, off of a Bogner. And it sounds really, really nice and clean and very, very pretty. And I like that. And so here's what this sounds like. Now for the clean arpeggiated tone, it's a sweep that's really high up on the neck. And so what I did to the board for this particular track is I added a compressor so it's not as harsh and it's a little bit more even sounding, because there is some volume variation while I'm playing it. And it by itself sounds like this. Now you also notice that I am using the phaser for this track, and it's a trick that I read Billy Corgan talking about once with the old Smashing Pumpkins records, is he used to turn a phase 90 on very, very slow just to get kind of a slow churn and just to add some color. And I really think it worked well for this particular scenario, but it wasn't enough to justify making a spot for it on my board. So then after that, we have a little bit of a clean break, and that is just a basic clean board. Again, with no compressor. We're back to just a delay into a clean amp. It's very straightforward. It's a very simple part, but it really kind of cuts up the song a little bit, and I liked it. And lastly, going into the clean part in the end with the fade in, I used the Ebo again, but for this time, I didn't use a distorted amp. I used the clean amp because I wanted it clean, since the accompanying part was also a clean guitar and not a big distorted guitar part. And that sounds like this. It's very simple. It's not a complicated board, but it really helps me to hash it out virtually in the DAW before I actually get the Velcro out and the scissors and all that stuff and actually start sticking pedals to the board. You've been wonderful. I've been Fluff. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.